Final reminder, this has been recorded. We record all of our meetings so that we can share with our community after the fact. So please feel free to share the video once it's up on YouTube, which should probably be tomorrow. So just to introduce tonight's Cloud Café, we're talking about faith and activism. So religious faith can be much more than just going to church. And I think a lot of people know that these days. It can provide the moral certainty to take practical action in support of causes and courage to risk arrest for some people. Today, some people of faith will speak about their active involvement in protest movements, whether it's XR, being involved in the COP events, the Palestinian solidarity, or whether it's campaigns against HS2 and things like that. They'll explain how their faith drives and sustains them and how their activism raises awareness of the cause close to their hearts. So our first speaker is Bliss. Priestess Bliss Magdalena Kadesh. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. Who is a pagan of mixed Jewish, German, Scots, and Cherokee heritage, and a founder of the Stroud Goddess Temple CIC Community Interest group. Community Interest?
Community Interest Company, yeah.
Company, sorry. Okay, I was thinking then, what's the C? And acts as a convener and internal verifier to the accredited Cotswold Priestess training. Following the footsteps of her mother, who initiated, you've explored a number of spiritual paths, which I hope that you will give us a bit more detail on. But Bliss has been a part of a lot of different protest movements and is currently a funded PhD candidate at the Centre for Gender and Violence Research at the University of Bristol, researching intimate partner violence in pagan faith communities. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us, and take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm so excited to be able to share with you. This is so important to me. And, you know, for me, spirituality and activism have always gone hand in hand. So if I think back really to my late teens, that was when I started going on marches and protests. And so, you know, some of the first actions that I took part in were for the Sexual Freedom Coalition. So, you know, that was about really increasing people's awareness of different relationship styles, sexual orientations, kink and BDSM, and really giving people more rights and, you know, more kind of social acceptability, actually, to be out and proud about their own path. And their own way of loving. So that was really important to me. I spent some time campaigning for legalized cannabis. And, you know, so one of my dear friends, Patrick Denning, he ran for Parliament for the Legalised Cannabis Alliance, and he's passed over into spirit now. But like, I used to attend a lot of actions with Pat, and like accompanying him on the train, you know, he had MS. And so it was this thing where we were kind of like trying to deal with the transport system and his scooter and make our way across London to these huge events, you know, people from all over the world were coming. So all of this was going on from when I was about 16 until I was about 18. And then I think I attended Stop the War. So that was really, I think I was like 19 or 20 when the Iraq War was happening, and there was a massive movement. So, you know, these were some of the biggest protests that have ever taken place, actually, these Stop the War campaign. I was part of XR in the beginning, so you're going to love this. This is a really funny story. So when there was that first XR action that was at the Houses of Parliament, so this is the one where they were like planting the fruit trees, right, on the lawn outside the Parliament. So I went there with my daughter Freya, and we were both dressed as witches, right? It was in the season of Samhain, so it's like this kind of Halloween, All Hallows. So we had these costumes on, and we were burning mugwort, right? And basically, we were kind of like a distraction. So we were right next to the police. And then we had this massive bowl of mugwort that we were burning. And so everyone that was walking past us, we were kind of blessing them with this smoke and saying, what are your dreams? What would you like to dream in terms of having a better world? How can you imagine the world beyond oil? How can you imagine the world if we weren't actually decimating the planet and making ourselves ill? You know, so it was really great because the mugwort is a kind of mild psychoactive, so it was actually helping people to like use their imagination and actually dream a better future into being. And of course, you know, all of the security staff, they were really interested in what we were doing, but they couldn't actually stop us because we weren't doing anything illegal. You know, we weren't like part of the main protest. So it was just one of those things. Like my work, when I'm involved in direct action, it tends to be things like that where I'm kind of on the edge. So I was part of Occupy St Paul's and the Bank of Ideas, and I spent a lot of time over the course of that movement in the Buddhist meditation tent. And you know, I was like massaging homeless people, so most of the time that I was there, I was working directly with people in a way that was giving them some kind of succor from the horrors of capitalism. And you know, when we moved into the Bank of Ideas, I was teaching workshops to everyone who was there in things like Thai massage, you know, so kind of giving people skills that they could help each other and just reducing stress. So a lot of my kind of work has been taking food to people who are in protest camps, you know, or just being there as a supporter, a kind of mental and emotional supporter for people who've come back from major actions. So I'm not always necessarily on the ground. You know, I'm not necessarily the person who's smashing windows or gluing myself to fences, but I'm 100% in support. And actually yesterday I visited the protest camp at the Royal Fort Gardens in Bristol, which is just opposite the postgraduate lounge at the university where I'm doing a lot of my writing at the moment for my thesis. And it was so refreshing to meet these young, very idealistic, very gentle protesters who are calling for divestment of the partnerships that the University of Bristol has with the arms trade. So, you know, I think this is great. I think they've got a huge fight on their hands, and there's going to be a lot of debate and negotiations that might need to happen before we come to the point of seeing real change. But I think it's really wonderful that the university is supporting their right to protest. And, you know, it's so important to know that they are supported in doing this, that they actually have their own voice and that they can speak out against what they see as injustice. And, you know, it's essentially this kind of nefarious interests who are directly influencing the syllabus within particularly science and technology. And I don't necessarily think that that is in the best interests of the planet. You know, it's certainly not in the best interests of people that are being subjected to live combat tests of newly developed weapons. So I think that's something that needs to change. You know, I mean, like I'm a funded PhD candidate, but I think because I'm in social policy, less of the funding that comes to people in my side of the university is coming from those kind of corporate interests. But at the same time, when you look at the university as a whole institution, it is something that I think we need to address on a very deep, fundamental level. We need to look at the ethics of what we're doing and how we're conducting this research. Yeah, so that brings me to my work as a feminist. and the work that I do within the goddess movement. So I don't necessarily attend very many direct action protests or marches nowadays. What I tend to do is community activism. And so I was very lucky to do some training in social permaculture. I'm going to name check some of my friends. So Lumi McNamara is really amazing, and I really recommend her training. And I went on a course with her a few years ago where she brought over incredible teachers from around the world. So I got to train with Rabina McCurdy in collaborative groups. Starhawk came over and she was talking about conflict resolution and how to kind of move through burnout as an activist. So she's been involved in so many different movements, and I think when I was learning with her, she really brought through the idea that you could combine a ritual into something that you were doing in order to enact social change. And ritual brings people together. It's something that enables us to collaboratively co-create a better version of our shared interactions. It creates a space for people to really hear one another's ideas and visions, and it creates a safe space for people to share their grief or their frustration or their anger and their pain. So it's like ritual is such a powerful container for catalyzing human emotion. And in the context of ritual, this can empower people to have more courage in terms of collective action, and actually making real change. So there's something where like permaculture is never really divorced from society. And I think people think that it's like about growing fruit and veg. It's like building soil, but it's part of that. But it's also about people, it's like people care, earth care, fair shares for all, right? These basic principles from Bill Mollison. So I kind of brought these principles of social permaculture through into the work that I was doing as a priestess. And so I was very lucky to encounter this community in Glastonbury who are so focused on effecting change through feminist spirituality and really waking people up to these ideas around the sacred feminine, which we've somehow become divorced from our embodied spirituality. So a lot of kind of modern more mainstream religions and spiritual traditions, they're very much about this kind of idea of spirituality and of the divine being something which is separate from us, that we can never know. But I think what you'll find within feminist spirituality and goddess spirituality in particular is that this is an embodied, really felt, experiential connection with the sacred. And when we recognize that we are embodiments of the sacred, that our physical bodies are the body of the goddess, and then you expand that to realize that everything within nature is also the embodiment of the goddess. So it's like the land is like her body, and so when these military industrial complex corporations and exploiting kind of industries are creating what's essentially ecocide. So when the land is being poisoned, when we're strip mining for these rare earth minerals, when we are testing nuclear weapons on desert sites, these things are destroying ecosystems. They're actually raping the earth. And I think in goddess spirituality, it's much easier to reconnect with that sense of being part of a reciprocal ecosystem. So we're never separate from the land. She's living and breathing and moving through us in every moment, and we can never be separate from her because we're breathing her breath. When we're eating, it's like we're eating her nourishment, we're eating her sustenance, it's moving through us. And when we actually had this conversation today in the volunteers group for the Goddess Temple, people are talking about rubbish in this right? And there's this thing about the rubbish and the recycling, and it's like we all have to take collective responsibility for this as a community. And I was like, there is no away, right? We can't throw things away. And what's going on in the temple is like a microcosm of this much larger issue where this rubbish is building up, and like nobody wants to deal with it, and oh, you know, this is going to be a problem. So I think there's something about like taking personal responsibility, but also recognizing that we are collectively accountable for making change within our culture. And so, like for me, I moved to Stroud 9 years ago now. And I was lucky enough to encounter a community of people who are spiritual activists, you know, a lot of them, like the first women's circle that I ever ran in Stroud, I was so blessed that Polly Higgins and Gail Bradbrook attended, and they were part of this circle. And you know, part of it was visioning in what we wanted to call in the future. And I remember them, like they were really asking for global change. They were like, we need to affect global change so that we can heal the planet. And I'm like, okay, well, let's ground that into our wombs, you know, let's kind of and then they literally did. They went out and actually changed the entire world, you know. So I think this kind of stuff is really powerful. There's something about sharing in circle. There's something about embodied practices where we are remembering our connection to our physical self. And there's something about recognizing that we are never separate from our ecosystem. We're never separate from the land, which is so easy to access in terms of feminist spirituality. And I think it's something that, you know, capitalism and this kind of colonialist, I would say it's a kind of Abrahamic tradition of missionary colonization. It caused people to become disconnected from their own ecosystems and to begin to see land and nature as a resource that could be exploited, or it could be exported, you know. And this whole thing about what's now become a massive issue with very, very wealthy companies and countries literally extracting all of the wealth and the natural resources out of countries in the global south. You know, this is something that was initiated by these kind of missionary colonists who said, oh, we're coming to save you, and you all have to convert to this religion, and if you don't, we're going to kill you, you know. So it was never like, it was never a choice, it was always coercive. And so this thing about this forced conversion and this idea of, you know, shipping off all of the riches and the natural resources to this other country where these kind of mythical white people were receiving all the goodness from their land. This is at the core of this kind of culture loss that has happened, where many traditional cultures around the world, and you know, I count my own motherline in this ancestry, is there was a loss of an understanding of how to nurture and live reciprocally with our ecosystem. And so, you know, I really recommend, if you haven't heard it, it's on Audible, or you can buy the book. It's called Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's a book by an ethnobotanist called Robin Wall Kimmerer. So she's really excellent, and she puts this in an academic, like a scientific context, but she's also talking about this idea of knowing our plant kindred, you know, like developing relationships with these beings who they can be our teachers. So they're not just a natural resource, they're actually our neighbors, you know. We need to learn how to be good neighbors again, and to be living in this cycle of reciprocity. Thank you so much for that link. Yeah, it's really good. So I really recommend this as a template for how we could potentially change our culture in order to live in reciprocity. So I'm kind of bringing this back to what I'm doing in Stroud. So what we've been doing in Stroud over the last 6 years is we've been building a community around the principles of social permaculture that includes the idea of goddess spirituality and feminist spirituality. So we've created a space which is centered on the feminine, but it's actually open to anyone. So you can be any background, you can be any gender, you can be any belief, and you can come and spend time in the goddess temple. And the way that we've created this space, the whole thing has been crowdfunded. It's so incredible, actually, that the community has come together, and we've ended up with this permanent premises. So we've been open for nearly 3 years now in the centre of Stroud. And you can come into this space, and we've designed it so it's like your grandma's house, right? But your grandma is the goddess, so it's cozy. You come in and there's cushions and there's blankets. The thing that's important about this space is that we have a seasonal altar in the space, okay? And the colors of the altar and the artwork in the space, it changes to reflect the different seasons of the wheel of the year. So it's like a kind of, it's an archetypal portal that's helping people to remember their connections to the natural cycles. So people bring natural objects into the temple. So at the moment we're in the season of Beltane, so like the temple is full of flowers, you know, there's like jars of roses all over the altar. But after this we're going to move into the season of midsummer, and people are going to start bringing in seashells. They're going to start bringing in like water from all the different springs around the Stroud valleys. So we've developed this goddess wheel where we have a different name of a different traditionally honored goddess from within the Cotswolds region. We've associated each of these goddesses with a different season of the year, but they each have archetypal qualities, you know, that we can connect it with, like both within ourselves, but we can also see those things emerging within the landscape, you know. And there's nothing more juicy and sensual and delicious than, like, for me, the season of Beltane, you know, because it's just so, oh, everything is just coming to life. So yeah, Beltane means lucky fire, and traditionally this was the season where people that were keeping like large herds of cattle, they would walk their cattle over the fire or through the fire, and this would help to reduce the amount of like parasites or illness that these cattle would have. So it's like this idea of Beltane or Bel's fire, this goes back far into history. It's something that's been documented you know, within Irish culture for at least the last 1,000 years or more. So it's something that it has its roots in this kind of pre-Christian history. But what you'll find within, and I have to say this, a lot of paganism, and you know, I'm a pagan, but I run an interfaith project, but I need to say that like most of modern paganism was only really developed since the 1950s. So we a lot of people like to lay claim to very ancient traditions within paganism, but it is a revivalist faith, and it's something where we're trying to pick up the threads of very ancient cultures, but we're devising new ways of honoring those traditions. And so, you know, I can't lay claim to being the keeper of the old religion, but what I can say is that we're really excited to remember and speak the names of these ancient goddesses who did represent aspects of the land. So for example, Kuda of the Cotswolds is representing the hills and the kind of abundant greenery of this region. You know, the Cotswolds has been very rich because we've got this amazing oolitic limestone, which is like feeding everything. And, you know, Sabrina, she is the goddess of the River Severn, and, you know, she gives life and she takes it away. She, you know, she's a tidal river, and she's got this incredible way of nourishing the land from the sea. But you know, around this river there's also like quicksand. Like 7 people a year get swept under with the tide of this river. There's something really powerful about her presence, and you can't fail to be impressed by the enormity of the Severn estuary. You know, it's really special. For anyone that's driven across the Severn Bridge, you know, I don't think anyone can deny the majesty and the raw power of this river, you know. So those are like two of the Cotswold goddesses. But right now we're in the season of Venus at Beltane, who's this lover. And they found a figurine of Venus in Gloucester when they were building the Forum. And, you know, most recently, there's been this horrific destruction of the landscape around the air balloon roundabout. I don't know if any of you have seen this, the A417 link road that's been built. But the archaeology that they've discovered when they've been building this link road, they found a figure of Cupid's. You know, and they've found some other kind of plinths and offering altars there. So there's going to be an exhibition, I think it's at the Gloucester Guildhall, where you can go and see all the artifacts that they have found while they've been creating this major road scheme. So even though, like, every time I drive past all these trees that they've killed, I cry, there has been some, like, archaeological benefit to building this road. But you know, I mean, it just breaks my heart. I cannot believe the destruction that takes place on this land in the name of motoring. It just breaks my heart every day. So I'm going to have to go and be part of the Stonehenge protests very soon, because they're going to be building a big tunnel there. So that will be my next bit of spiritual activism. Yeah, I'll be stopping that tunnel.
Amazing. Wow, what an
that was absolute, a lot of talking.
No, it was wonderful. It covered a lot of different areas. It was really, really interesting. I was taking so many notes while you were talking.
About like the work that I'm doing in Stroud. So with the temple, that is like a collaborative, like the whole thing is based on the principles of radical collaboration. So even though, like, I was the person that glued down the carpet tiles, you know, and like I've stuck with the project from the beginning, but we've got a committee of directors. So there's 4 temple directors, and you know, we've got a community of about 30 volunteers who come from all different backgrounds, all different faiths and walks of life, and you know, like men and women and non-binary people. So everybody is welcome as part of this project, and it's like it belongs to everyone. That's the thing that's important about the temple, is you know, you can go there and we're not going to try and convert you. All that we're trying to do is like have a safe space where you can connect with your own being, and somehow being in that safely held space, it creates the potential for people to go out and make change in the world and change their lives. And so, you know, we're quite lucky to have had a few different activist groups actually come and use our space for their meetings. So I think that's really important as well, particularly in terms of environmental activism, but also in terms of community activism, you know, and relational activism. So all of that kind of thing, we're bound up in it. Even though we are a faith organization, you know, we're there to create a safe space for people to be inspired to do other types of activism, even if we might not, like, for example, I couldn't go to like a Free Palestine protest and held up a banner for the Goddess Temple, but we did have we had a tree of unity, and it was amazing. It had all of these different embroidery motifs. So there were Jewish embroidery motifs, and there were Palestinian embroidery motifs that local people had made, and they were all on the same tree, you know, and everybody was like putting their good wishes into that during the season of Yule. So I think that kind of stuff, like having a safe container where everyone, no matter what their particular polarized view might be, they know that they can come into the temple and they'll be welcomed, and that it's a safe space for them to find some nourishment in the midst of, you know, what can be very rocky political terrain.
Absolutely. I think everyone is desperate for a safe space right now, and if it's a safe space, it can encourage you to grow and begin a journey of healing internally or helping the world heal externally. It's a really beautiful thing that you're doing. I'm just going to pull out some of the points that I wrote down. I think a lot of people in Westminster could do with some slightly psychoactives on Tuesday. So very interesting to hear your story about the protests there. Having, protest be and the sort of end game of that being escape from the horrors of capitalism. I love that sentence that you gave. Being a facilitator of a protest is just as important as being at the protest itself. I think that that's something that is also really important, and making change happen looks different for so many different people, and it's really just being a part of it, like mentally and physically, is really important. The ethics of education, really liked when you started talking about that with regards to like the university in Bristol, but I mean that's every university, and I know that like the
and I just need to say,
movement
like,
is big.
That's my personal view, and I'm not saying that as a representative of my department or the university, but I am sharing with you my private view.
Absolutely, but I think that a lot of people working in universities think exactly the same, or studying in education. It's a historic system that people have been fighting to change, and that fight will continue. And it doesn't mean that it's not an important institution. It just means that like all of our important institutions probably need some massive systemic changes if we look deep enough. So I think yeah, and then I think the moment you talked about like culture loss, I think that is such a huge thing, with us having no connection either to the land or to where our food comes from, or a whole host of things. And I think that is like I feel like we could have a whole Cloud Cafe just on culture loss, and that would be very interesting as well. But yeah, I can't believe I didn't know about this place, and I lived in Stroud for a long time, and I'm coming back in the summer and I will be looking out for it. But we probably have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to just check in. We haven't had either of our other speakers join, have we? Speak now, forever hold your peace.
No.
Okay, amazing. We will move.
You have messaged.
No problem, Elizabeth. Thanks anyway. Okay, so Sue Fenton, do you want to ask the first question in chat?
Hello. What my first one? Oh yes. I'm just wondering about the attitude of men. This whole goddess thing. I mean, I would imagine to some men this would feel quite threatening, and I just wondered what attitude you get from them when you talk about what you do.
So I'm going to quote Kathy Jones, who founded Glastonbury Goddess Temple. So what she says is that the word goddess also contains the word God. So I really like that. So there's never a point of separation, and I think patriarchy harms everyone regardless of gender. So there's something about inviting everyone to be part of reclaiming an egalitarian culture which is focused on centering the source of life. So I can take words relating to gender out of it, and I can still be talking about goddess spirituality. So for me, it's not necessarily gendered. It's much more about having an understanding of our interrelatedness, and matriarchy. The idea of matriarchy or a matrifocal culture is not the mirror image of patriarchy. So like patriarchy is based on this idea of power over, that someone is got more power than you, and they're gonna coerce you and dominate you, crush you, you don't do what they want, whereas like this idea, and there are matriarchal cultures around the world. I just need to say that there's been a lot of really good anthropology publications that show these cultures do exist, where everyone within the culture holds a status where they are valued, and that there is a sense of interconnection, a sense of celebrating each other's unique offerings and wisdom, and a space where everyone is heard and everyone has the power to effect change. And so, like, for me, that's what good feminism is, and I don't see it as being divorced from goddess spirituality. But I mean, certainly, like, everybody's sitting around the same table and having a say. I don't know why that would be threatening to men. Do you? It's a bit like that question about the bear.
Yeah, I mean, men can feel very threatened when they see, or some men can feel threatened if they think that women are kind of taking control.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's an interesting one. And I think, like, there's this thing about control, isn't there? And there's the thing about agency, and being able to exercise your own agency is really different from like having power over. And I want to cite my mentor, Lynn Sedgmore. Lynn's written an amazing book called Presence Activism. I really recommend it. But I spent 2 years training with Lynn on a goddess luminary training. And in her goddess luminary book, she talks about these different ways of holding power, you know. So you can have power with, you know, or you can have power under, which is this kind of idea of us needing to maybe have a revolution or liberate one another. And, you know, this idea of power over, where you're kind of dominating or dictating to others, I think that's something that we need to try and move away from. But we all need to be able to claim our individual power and our collective power as change makers in the world. So I don't think that's ever divorced from activism, but I can understand why it might appear threatening to someone who has had a lot of dominating power, to feel as though that might be somehow being there, you know. But I believe that if we slice up a pie equally, someone else getting a piece of the pie doesn't mean that you get less pie. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw another question that you had put in the chat about what was it, like ecocide and misogyny being the same thing?
Barbara's question.
Yeah. So
Hi, Bliss.
Okay.
Hi, Bliss.
Go on, Barbara.
I just thought that one of the things I think you're saying is that the same sort of cruelty and inequality that produces predatory capitalism produces misogynistic behavior too. And I think what you're saying is they're part of the same thing. What do you
so
think?
I believe that they have the same roots, yes. I don't see them as being a different motivating factor. But what I will say is that people of any gender can unfortunately use those principles for harm. So it's not necessarily men, it's anyone that is embodying patriarchal kind of power over philosophies. You know, Ayn Rand is probably one of those people going to talk about, like, who is embodying those ideas of like self-centeredness and greed. I see those things as being like going off the deep end of patriarchy and power over. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Maria. Thanks, Barbara.
Oh, thanks. I'm sorry, I can't write at the moment, so I haven't put anything in the chat. I've got a frozen shoulder, but I just wanted to introduce myself because I don't think you know me. So my name's Maria Curtis. I'm fairly new to Stroud, and I was quite involved where I lived before in sort of setting up. Well, I was involved with XR, but also very much locally based initiatives that crossed. It was interfaith and people of no faith at all working together. And I think I think that's terribly important, that we're inclusive in whatever we're doing to try and get down to our common humanity, you know, and forget about beliefs and things. That's fairly superficial, but I've found Joanna Macy very helpful, because I struggle with despair. I mean, it's so hard when you're faced with the facts of ecocide, someone said, and what we're doing to our fellow beings and our other living things. And I find Joanna Macy, she's a Buddhist. I don't know if people know about Joanna Macy, do they? Yeah. And for me, she's got some very sensible things to say about how we can find a route between despair on the one hand, which she calls business as usual, despair on the one hand, and on the other hand, denial. And that's denial she calls business as usual, you know, just thinking, oh, it'll be all right in the end, whatever, you know. And she outlines a sort of route and how we get through those two polarities, and it's based on things like gratitude for the gifts of the earth, and also working together like you're doing. I love your energy, Bliss. I thought it was fantastic.
I really love Joanna Macy. Yeah, and like back in the day, like when I was part of Transition Towns, we used to do a lot of work with her sort of visioning processes, you know, and these ideas of like composting grief. Like, there's so much good stuff. Yeah, so we could probably do a whole Cloud Cafe just about Joanna Macy. Yeah, I love her. She's like a shero for me.
But I think that is important, isn't it? I mean, I've been to a couple of sessions in Stroud that are called Taking Heart, where we go up to Slade Bank Woods, and I think just lamenting is actually an intervention, because it gives you solidarity. You know, just saying, yes, it is really awful, and that just sharing that enables you to move on and think, well, what can I do? You know.
Yeah, you know, because things are bad.
Things are bad, yeah.
But there is still cause for celebration.
Oh, absolutely.
And, you know, this is what I so believe, that it's really important that we take time in community, not only to grieve and to express our fears, and to express our frustrations about what's happening, you know, and the almost insurmountable challenge that we have of surviving now this almost unstoppable climate change situation that we're in. But also living our lives and celebrating that we, and you know, there's this like meme that did the rounds of this prophecy from the Hopi elders, you know, and it was like the river is flowing very fast and you have to let go and rejoice at who is there with you, you know, just allow the water to carry you, because you have to release and kind of relinquish your need to have any control over what's happening. I think that's really important, and just acknowledge that none of us are in control. All that we can do is be joyous in our attempts to influence things for the better. And I think like anyone of any faith can do this. And, you know, I am an interfaith person. Like, although goddess is, I devote most of my time to the goddess. Like, I have spent time in different Buddhist organizations. I've been on all kinds of like pilgrimages. I went on a pilgrimage for Mary Magdalene in France last year. You know, so I think there's a lot that we can gain from looking at different cultures cultures and different rituals and celebrations, and inviting that sense of communion, you know, of being, and what I mean by that is acknowledging our deep connections within community. And you know, I actually took my family, I live in a small Cotswolds village, and I took my whole family to the Easter Sunday service in my village, you know, because I really wanted us to be a part of that community and to feel that sense of connection with one another. So I don't think that necessarily having a different belief system, we don't have to be separate. I think everybody wants connection. Everybody wants a sense of belonging within their community. And I would certainly welcome like anyone of any faith. We do get people from the Christian community in Stroud who come to visit the Goddess Temple, and we have some really great conversations there. We've got a lady who comes who is Islamic. There's a chap who comes who is like a Hindu, and you know, they all come and like make ablutions by the altar, and you know, it's beautiful, like to see like everybody can honor the feminine within their own tradition in their own way. So there's always space for that. And yeah, I think it's just really important to acknowledge and hold space for each other's grieving. Like we light a lot of candles for people's relatives if they've recently passed over into spirit. There's a lot of that work that goes on. We get a lot of people that come in and they just want someone to listen to them, you know, when they're talking about the situation in the world, or something that's happened that's personally challenging within their own lives. And so, you know, we were lucky enough to get funding as a warm space from the district council as over the winter time. And so, you know, some people are coming into the temple because they can't afford to heat their houses. You know, it's like the cost of living crisis is really impacting on everyone. And so I think we need community spaces more than ever. And I think we need community spaces which are also spaces of the heart. And it's not always as easy to create that sense of welcoming in a secular space. Whereas if you know that you can come into a space and you can light a candle, you can write a prayer, maybe you want to read a book, you know, we've got like a community library, and in that library we've got books from all different spiritual traditions. So you know, you might decide that you want to pick up a manual of Zen Buddhism, you know, or you want to like read the Bhagavad Gita. Like you can do all of that stuff in the temple, and no one is going to judge you, or no one's going to put pressure on you to be anyone else but who you are. And I think we just really need those spaces in our lives, and that then it nourishes the part of us that can go out into the world and like speak truth to power, you know, and fight this horrendous, coercive, it's just unbelievable what's going on now in the world. And you know, the people who are in government I would love it if they were actually representing their constituents. That would be so great, wouldn't it? Like all these people that are writing to their MP, it would be so cool if there were people actually in the cabinet office who were taking consideration of the people that can't afford to heat their houses. You know, that's one example.
Of the people who elected them, yes, it would be amazing if they actually listen to those people who are struggling, but who also put them in that job in the first place.
Yeah, and I wonder definitely if their own faith, you know, and there are some, you know, MPs of faith, how their faith would impact on the decisions that they make when they vote on motions in Parliament, you know, and if you were truly voting in league with the spiritual teachings, then, you know, I'm sure that the voting record of many MPs would be very different.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. Well, that was very fascinating, great question / comment / introduction, Maria. It was it's been lovely to have you here at the Cloud Café, and please join us again for future Cloud Cafés, and obviously get everybody get yourselves down to the Goddess Temple in Stroud, and experience for yourselves the interconnectedness and the interfaith community that they've been building there for years now, and that I'm sure will last for years to come, because like Bliss has said, people are desperate for a sense of community, and people are desperate for a safe space that is non-judgmental, and where they can say as much or as little as they need to in order to self-heal and progress, and then, you know, build energy to be activists in their own life or in the wider world. And I think that so many people are still searching for that. And so if you know somebody who is, please recommend that they connect with these different communities that are already active in Stroud. And I'm sure in other places as well. If you're not, I know we've got some people from London here, and I'm sure there's lots going on in London as well. I think I just want to say thank you to Bliss for coming and for stepping up to the plate with our lack of other speakers, which has been which it was a shame, but also you know, a benefit to all of us who are here, because we've got to hear you speak, which has been really fantastic. And I think like the key message from tonight is about, you know, whatever your cause, there's things within them that connect us, and they connect us to each other as humans, but they connect us to a wider ecosystem, to animals, to plants, and that we need to start reconnecting with those things in order for us to fully appreciate what it is that we're trying to save in terms of the world, which I think is a big issue and a big want for all of us. So thank you so much for reconnecting us with that, and starting this little fire in all of our bellies, which I'm sure is the case. And thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us. It was really, really fascinating, and I'm sure we will see you around Stroud. And thank you to everybody who joined as well. It's really always great to see your faces and spend a Wednesday evening with you. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Jenny, as well, and
SCB.
thank you, Bliss.
Thanks, Bliss.
Thank
Thanks, Elizabeth,
you.
for all your hard work.
Bliss.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Elizabeth.
Have a good evening. Bye bye.